Welcome to the Grief Dreams podcast. Thanks for tuning in. This is where we have conversations with guests about life, loss, grief, and grief dreams, which can be dreams of your loved ones that have passed away. So if you want to know more about the topic, you can definitely check out our website, griefdreams.ca, for more information. And here are 4 ways you can help support the podcast and help us spread awareness on this amazing topic. So number 1, subscribe and rate the podcast on the platform that you listen to it on. Number 2, become a member of the podcast, and that's for as low as $1.50 a month. This helps us run the podcast, and you can find the Patreon link in the show notes. Number 3, you can take the Grief Dreams online course by Dr. Joshua Black at griefdreams.ca. And lastly, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Clubhouse, and Facebook at Grief Dreams. And now on to the show.
Hi there. Welcome to the Grief Dreams podcast. I am Jade Carling Black, and I have alongside me Dr. Joshua Black, and we are here to present part 2 of the episode update recaps for 2021. And just would like to welcome you all. I hope you had the opportunity to listen to the previous episode that highlighted and showcased our episodes that we recorded and uploaded this year in the wonderful year of 2021. I know that it was a year filled with a lot of challenges, and many of us were grieving all different things in all different types of ways, but I hope that you will take the time to reflect on the clips that we're going to present to you in this episode and find some meaning and some joy and some comfort within them. So I'd like to just start off with episode 198, Sage Dyer. This was a beautiful episode. Sage is an author, and we talked about the recent release of her book, The Knowing. Beautiful book, by the way. And she shared a grief dream of her father. This episode was so profound, and I really enjoyed this conversation. Take a listen.
Yeah, I had a lot of dreams, and I still have a lot of dreams. And after a while, I could sort of put them into different categories, which is why I said yes to your podcast, because I think this topic is really fascinating. Especially in the early days, I had a lot of dreams where I would be finding my dad, and he would still be alive, and I'd be convincing him that he didn't have to die, or coming up with some last-minute invention to save him, saying, if you just aren't alone at this time, then I'll be able to call 911, and things like that were definitely grief-driven dreams for me. And I think those are common. I also dreams where I was angry at him, dreams where he would show up and then disappear and I wouldn't be able to find him, just dreams that were more stressful than anything. And I had those all the time. I don't really have them anymore. But I had one dream of my dad that truly felt like a visitation, and I have actually no doubt in my mind that it was. Basically, in my dream, I was in my apartment. I lived in a studio apartment at the time in New York, and so the door to our apartment was right next to my bed. And I was sleeping in my bed in real life, and my alarm went off, and I decided to hit snooze because I was tired. And I went, so I hit snooze, and I immediately went back into a dream. I immediately went back to sleep. And I was immediately also dreaming. And in my dream, I was in exactly the same place I was in real life. I was laying in my bed in my apartment, looking at my phone. And as I'm doing that, I hear my door open to my apartment. So I sit up and I look around the wall corner, and it's my dad walking in. And he's got like a grin on his face. And so I got out of my bed and I ran up to him and I said, I know that I'm asleep, but this isn't a dream. And he said, it's not a dream. You're right. This is real. And I said, you're really here, aren't you? And he said, I'm really here. And I said, I became skeptical in that moment. I said, okay, if you're really here, then I could touch you. And he said, so touch me. And he put his arms out, and I grabbed his arms with my hand, and I could feel them in my dream. I could feel his hairy arms, the way they felt in real life. And in that moment, I dropped my skepticism and I hugged him, and then we talked, and it was just like a beautiful 10 minutes. And then my alarm went off, and then I was awake again, and I reflected. I mean, I carried that dream with me I couldn't shake the feeling for weeks. I was telling everyone about it because I was like, you guys, it wasn't a dream. It was real. Like, my dad was in my apartment.
Thank you, Sage, for coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed talking with her about the different dreams she has had. I know some of them are negative, some of them are positive. And when it comes to her sisters that have come on the podcast, Serena and Sky, they had more positive dreams. So it's really interesting to see the different dreams that people can have within the same family. Okay, next we have episode 199, Caitlin Garvey, and she's an author and English professor. And so here she talks about a grief dream of her mother.
Since publishing the book, I've had dreams where she'll like pop up at a family dinner or something, and then I'll be like, where the heck have you been? But then I'll get over it. But initially I'll have some rage. But yeah, I think it's weird when she's like there in present moments, because then I suddenly have a panic, like, are you on your right medication, or are you declining treatment? A lot of my dreams have been about recently. She has cancer, but she's not addressing it. That's happened a lot recently. And actually one I had maybe a year or so ago where I don't remember the specifics, but I just remember the feeling that I got from it, which was just complete comfort. I just woke up and then I knew it was just such a good dream that I wanted to basically just go back to sleep forever.
Thank you, Caitlin, for your contributions to the podcast. Lovely clip there. Next, I'd like to introduce episode 192, which was with Dr. Roger Lohman. The episode was titled Cultural Dream Theories, and Roger is a professor of anthropology. He shared a grief dream of his sister. Take a listen.
Well, the story was, so I was studying their beliefs in ghosts and spirits and things, and I now understand that when I dreamed about a ghost in the field, that was my brain comparing what I was learning, their ideas about ghosts, with my old ideas about ghosts that I'd learned as a child. So the dream was actually kind of a waking vision. I was just on the edge of waking up, and I saw the ghost of my dead sister, who had died many years before, appear, and she was nasty and harassing me and possibly hurting me. And I woke up, and what most struck me at that moment was that I was actually scared by it, because I was at that point thoroughly convinced that ghosts are imaginary. So it really impressed me that I could be scared by this, even though my waking self did not believe in it at all and was not worried. So that gave me a great insight and an empathy, on how dreams can convince people to believe in these things. They really feel so convincing, especially at the time. And then if you get social support that was a ghost, that's going to really cement that, in people's minds. But the way I came to understand it more later was I thought about it a lot, and what seemed strange to me was that my sister, first of all, I had dreamt about my sister being dead before, many years before when it had happened, but it wasn't a threatening situation. It was more just, this is weird, my sister is not alive anymore. The dream was of her being buried, and it was just weird trying to make sense of it all for a little boy's mind. And this time, my sister was a nasty, threatening ghost. And so the nasty threateningness is like, where did that come from? I don't have it, I'd not had any anxieties or worries about this sister or worries about ghosts or life after death. But the local people had been telling me, don't go out at night. There's ghosts that can hurt you, and dead people can cause problems. And so I was absorbing this culture and studying it, and it was interacting with my home culture in my brain as my brain was updating its model of reality. And so this juxtaposed images of my traditional ghosts and the new ghosts produced this hybrid for my dreaming mind. And because I remembered the image into waking life, it could have a stronger impact on my thought than it would have if it had just been processing that I forgot as soon as I woke up.
Thank you, Roger, for coming on the podcast. It's really amazing to hear the different perspectives that people have on dreams in other cultures. And so that's a great episode for people to learn more about that. Next, we have episode 201, Heather Stang. She's an author and founder of Mindfulness and Grief Training Institute. And she talks about the grief dream of her dog, Monster. Take a listen.
I have had a monster dream, and it was about a year or so ago. So I wish I can't believe I didn't write it down.
Wait, what? Hold on.
I know. Look, Yeah, right.
No judgments here, Heather.
Oh no, there's judgment. There's a lot of judgment.
There's
going
a
on
lot
right
of
now.
judgment, and I will never hear the end of this. And every time I talk to you, you can remind me, because it is ridiculous that I didn't write it down, especially since I'm like a journaling person. I think it was maybe at a time where I didn't have the energy to do a lot of that. So it was early on. It was maybe probably 4 months or so after Monster died, and we had Ariel in the house. I wasn't like, she and I are tight now. I liked her. I'm a great dog mom no matter what, but I'm not abusive or neglectful. But it wasn't a real clear specific dream. And my grief dreams, the few I've had in my life, they're not like super narrative. They're more of feeling, that's more of an emotion. And it was just like Monster was his 6-year-old self, which is when he came into my life. My husband's had him since he was a puppy. Monster came into my life at a very rambunctious 6. And Monster was probably about that age in the dream. And he was sitting in his little monster pose that looks kind of like a triangular shape. And he's just looking at you with the eyes that are saying carrot. And it was just a comforting, like, he's okay dream. That's all I've got around what it was. But I woke up feeling a lot less anxious. And I felt like he was starting to move into my heart space. It's one of those things that's a little hard for me to explain in words, but part of my processing grief is feeling like they're portable inside me, if that makes sense. Like I can carry them with me everywhere. And that's been a process, but I feel like that dream did do that for me.
Thank you, Heather, for sharing those insights with us on the podcast. Next, I'd like to introduce episode 202, Kalsuma Ali, who is a British Bangladeshi podcaster, and she's also the host of Bereavement Room. Kalsuma shares a grief dream of her mother.
I've had loads of dreams about my mum and my dad. And interestingly, I had a dream. My dad was alive at that point. It was 4 weeks before he died. I had this dream that we were in our garden, and in our family house in the garden, there is a pavement in the middle that separates the earth that you can walk on. And they used to grow food on either side, so like vegetables and fruit. And in this dream, it was a really sunny day like it is today. And I could see both of my parents amongst all the herbs, like the coriander. It was very, very green. And my mum was saying something to me. She was really happy and she was trying to say something. And I can't, it was a year ago now, so it's very vivid and it's quite vague. But I always think about that dream because at the time it didn't occur to me that what my mum was saying, which I think I can recollect, is that it's time, or your dad's joining me, or something like that. And I was on the earth side, the muddy side, right? And I was trying to she was trying to reach out to me, but I just couldn't. And when I looked down, all I could see was like the earth and the mud. And when I looked at them, they were like in the sunshine amongst the coriander and all the green herbs. And yeah, it was, see, the thing is, when my mum comes to me in my dreams, it's usually when I'm sad or she's trying to comfort me or I'm distressed. And I can't remember what was happening 4 weeks before my dad died. It was in the new year. It was a very comforting dream, but I didn't really realize until 4 weeks later that perhaps that dream was her telling me that your dad's going to die. And because my dad did die 4 weeks after that dream. And I feel like it's very symbolic, this dream. Very symbolic to me, and it's something that I think about on and off a lot. And I wish I interpreted it at the time, but I don't really know if that would have made any difference. I was just so happy to see my mum in my dreams because that's the only way that I can connect with her, right? And yeah, I have been reading about dream interpretations since that dream. There's a book by Ibn Sirin. He was a dream interpreter from the 8th century, I think. And yeah, I've been reading a lot about grief dreams and been listening to your podcast as well, because it's something that I think about more so now that my dad has died. But I've always had these really strong dreams, and it's something that I need to give more thought to, and I've started reading about it. But that dream always comes back to me because it's very symbolic of the fact that it was 4 weeks before my dad died, and my mum was she was telling me like it's time or something along those lines. She was trying to reach out to me, and that was probably my most memorable grief dream.
Thank you, Kelsuma, for coming on the podcast and sharing. Next, we have episode 203, Haika Mertens, and she's an author, and she talks about her grief dream of her husband, and she gets into details about the dream she had after moving places after he died. Take a listen.
Dreams, in part because this is coming up, and I've been listening also to some of your other podcasts, which are great. I love listening to the dreams. I like listening overall to conversations, but the dreams are always, that little extra at the end. And I thought, my dreams changed over time. And I thought that's, one of the things that I did want to just, briefly mention. And that was, in the beginning, we have these dreams, and it would be like Richard was alive and it was all normal and everybody was healthy. And then I would wake up and it'd be quite devastating in the beginning because, of course, that wasn't reality. And so my dreaming life was out of sync with my physical life. And then over time, that changed, where it came to a point where, absolutely, I understood that he was, gone. And there was a point where I even complained to somebody. I said, I'm so tired of these dreams, And they said, would you rather you didn't dream of him? And I said, no, I think that in that case, I'm very grateful to have these dreams. And now they've shifted again, which is very interesting for me because it's almost like my dream space is like a third space where we still come together. But it's very clear that he's not in the physical world with me. And it's quite all right for him and I to be in this other world. And it's almost like a continuation of a conversation in a different way. So, I recently had one where it was like he and I were just kind of looking at our daughter and what she was doing, the way parents do. You sometimes look over at your kids and you kind of have that moment together. And that was, that space that it's now that way, which is great. A lot of the dreams that I've listened to in your podcast, I love the fact that people are generally well and happy in their dreams when they're having these dreams with their loved ones. I wanted to go in the other direction. I had a really disturbing dream at one point, and that was that I was dreaming, and I dreamt a different version of the dream for like 2 nights in a row, and it was about him and I coming together, and he felt like I had left him in one of the old houses that we had been in, and he'd been wandering and looking for me. And then the next night he was in another house that we had been in, and he'd felt like I'd left him and abandoned him. And I was like, what is going on? And I was speaking to a friend of mine who's a healer, and she had said to me, when these things come, just kind of reorient and let him know where you are. And they appeared shortly after I moved cities. She said, maybe he doesn't realize that you've moved cities, and this is why all of a sudden this is going on. And so that's what I did. And then it was all settled, right? But it was me consciously being in that moment in the dream where it was like, okay, I know you're looking for me. This is where I am now, and this is why I'm here. And then it was like, oh, okay.
So did you leave the house that you guys were together in and left for somewhere else?
I did. That would be another day's conversation. Yes, I was there for a couple of years. They always say don't make any big decisions in the first year, which is probably excellent advice. I would almost say maybe for 2 in some cases. But I grew up in Toronto, and my parents, unfortunately, were declining. They started to decline after my brother died, and it just escalated again after my husband died. And so I was driving a lot back and forth I was in Waterloo at the time, back and forth. And the situation had become such that they really needed more support. And I had hoped that in moving back to Toronto, not only would I be there for whatever time they had, and that it would also give me kind of a bit of a fresh start. So yeah, I moved cities, I moved homes, and that was shortly after that I had that dream. So yeah.
Well, I think it's great that you brought that up, because it brought in another conversation, and it helped people understand how dreams reflect waking life. So that's one position that the individual told you about, is the soul was lost, confused on what happened, where you went, that sort of thing. It's kind of sad, and I'm glad you found your way through that with whatever you did. But there's another way of looking at it, and it's that it represented your waking life, and that you left a part of him, right? You left and chose, and how difficult that must have been. And if you're dreaming about it, it was something that you're still trying to process. And I don't know how much emotion you can process as you're moving and then dealing with something new, a new challenge. Yeah. And so, yeah, very, very difficult to work through that in the place you were. And I sort of like see that, and I said, oh, wait a second. Like, there is, a lot of emotion here that just is unresolved. And it just takes, as you said, like, it takes time, it takes a lot of work. But I've had, like, just talking about this in general, there's other people who have had dreams where they've moved and they're spiritual, and they had a dream where the individual says, oh, I know you've moved, right? There's no wandering or abandonment in those dreams either. So I always like to look at it in both angles, like for those who are spiritual, and even like those, like if this is just sort of the mind, what can we learn about grief through this lens? And, as you sort of brought it up, it's a very difficult process moving. And also there's probably a feeling of abandoning something that was very precious to you.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think the other thing that, you said, and that I talked about a little bit too, is it really is a process. And we need to give ourselves the time and the space to kind of allow our bodies and our brains to do what they need to do, so that they can heal. And whether or not it's the two combinations, but you're right, it was a very difficult thing, very difficult choice to go. It was the better choice at that moment. But I also knew I was moving back into a space where I was going to be doing more caregiving. So all those kind of things, as you're living through all that, frequently we don't culturally create a space for us to process, I don't think, especially when things become, I can't even say that. I was going to say when they become complex, but I think when you're in a relationship with somebody, from conversations that I've had with people, and it's either an intense relationship or it's something that's a very long-term relationship, it is not something that you can just kind of, first of all, move on from. I truly believe this is a piece that has to become part of our life story. And we have to become more comfortable as a culture in accepting that piece, that these are things that we will carry with us the same way we carry other things, like becoming parents with us. It's just all part and parcel of it. And it's not, like, I truly believed, that I would be out of this grief space within 3 months. And it was such a surprise and a shock that I wasn't. I'm a bit of an overachiever, but I really underestimated. And that's a big one. As you said, different, yes. And you're right, there probably was a component to that. I did leave something behind. And I had, maybe myself felt like I was abandoning it.
Thank you, Heike, for sharing that insightful piece. Next, I'd like to introduce episode 204, Autumn Toel Jackson. She's an author and shares a grief dream of her husband.
With my late husband, though, I have had a ton of dreams, and most of them are horrible. I think I've had 2 dreams where he was there, felt right. And most of the dreams I have are me seeing him somewhere and him not knowing me, not recognizing me. Those were rough ones, and I had them a lot more in that first year. They were pretty consistent, at least once a week. And it was just this huge, like, consistent abandonment feeling. And he died suddenly also. And so in my mind, I kind of assumed that because I did feel very abandoned by him. He was 30 years old and went for a jog, and his heart stopped. And they never found out why. They just said unknown natural causes. And so I do think that's part of why a lot of the dreams are just him abandoning me, but it doesn't make sense for him not to recognize me in the dream. So those are probably the main ones, but I've also had other ones where he went missing and I couldn't get anybody to help me look for him. And then months later, I'd find him and he'd still be alive, but just barely. And he'd be mad at me because I didn't encourage people or force people to look for him more.
Thank you, Autumn, for coming on and sharing your dreams. Next, we have episode 205, Zachary Steele, and he's an author and the executive director of the Broadleaf Writers Association. And so in this episode, I remember we did talk about his fiction book, which is one of the first authors that have come on that had fiction, which is really interesting to hear about. And so in here, we talk about a grief dream he has of his cat as he was writing his book. Take a listen.
Halfway through writing this book, I lost my cat, my companion of 13 years, and I would say always been like a furry human to me. And she died of cancer, and it was like halfway through this book. And that was, it just completely stopped the writing process. And when I finally was able to get back to it, when I was actually able to emotionally write the story without losing it, it changed the tone of the story. And I did have some dreams during this period of time where my cat Maggie was there. She wasn't like an active participant in my dreams. And another point to say here is I don't tend to remember my dreams very, very often. But she was present in a number of these dreams as I was writing, and always just there, an observer in the dream kind of thing. So I really didn't think anything of it until well after writing this, and I was like, I wonder, was that like her spirit, her consciousness kind of letting me know she was there and observing me through this process. That's what that brings me, warms my heart a little bit to think of it in that sense.
Thank you, Zachary, for your contributions to the podcast. We really appreciate you coming on. Next, I'd like to introduce episode 206, Dr. Karen Wyatt. She's an author and hospice doctor. She shared a grief dream of her father, which enabled her to become more compassionate with herself. This episode is entitled, These Roads Can Be Tricky Sometimes. Take a listen.
And ultimately, I did have a dream of my father that was really powerful for me, and that also helped me to make a shift. And I can tell you about that if you want me to.
Yes, please do. How long was this after he died?
It was actually 11 years.
Wow.
And so I had gone away on a writing retreat, and I was really upset with myself, actually, because at 11 years after my dad's death, I was still grieving and still not feeling joy in my life. And I was blaming myself, like, what is wrong with me that I'm still in this state and I can't seem to get through it. So I gone away on a writing retreat, and I thought, I'm determined. I'm going to have a breakthrough. I'm going to write and write and write. I'm going to figure out like why I'm still sad and why I still can't smile spontaneously. How could this be after 11 years? I knew if I tell one of my colleagues, they will say I should be on medication, that I have pathologic grief. And I just wanted to try to solve this crisis. But I'd been on this retreat for a few days, and nothing had changed. Nothing had happened. There'd been no breakthrough until the last night of the retreat. And that's when I had this dream. And in the dream, I was riding in my dad's old pickup truck. He had this red Chevy pickup that he used to drive all the time. And I was in the passenger seat, and Dad was driving. And we were in the Bighorn Mountains, these remote mountains where we always used to go fishing and camping, driving on these dirt roads. And I spent so much of my life with my dad there, driving in those remote places. So it was the greatest feeling because I was there with my dad, and we were back in that place that I loved, and he was driving the truck. And it became clear to me we were on our way to help my Uncle Ralph, who had gotten his truck stuck in a mud hole on the mountain. And so we were going up there to help pull him out of the mud. And I was kind of laughing and making fun of my uncle. And I said to my dad, can you believe it? It's the dry season. So there's only like one mud hole on the entire mountain, and Ralph manages to get stuck in it. And I was laughing about that. And I turned, and my dad turned and looked at me, and he had the most beautiful expression on his face. It's hard for me to describe, but his eyes were shining, and he had this slight smile, and there was just pure love and compassion coming from him. And I think of it as some Buddha statues I've seen where Buddha is just slightly smiling, but I don't know. That's how it just felt like something so sacred and beautiful, all of this love that was pouring from him. And he turned and looked me right in the eyes, and he said, "These roads can be tricky sometimes." And instantly in the dream, so these roads can be tricky sometimes. And instantly in the dream, suddenly I was driving the truck and I was by myself, and I came up to my Uncle Ralph and I got up and said, "I'm here to help you. I'm going to pull you out of the mud because I have Dad's truck with the winch on the front, and we're going to use it and we're going to get you out of the mud." And so I woke up from that dream, and suddenly it was like, wow, like what this dream is telling me is that like, first of all, these roads are tricky. These roads of grief and traveling this journey, it's tough. It's not just a straight path. There's so many obstacles and so many difficulties to get through. And what Dad was saying to me is, be compassionate with yourself. Don't judge yourself. Like, it's okay. It's okay to be on the tricky roads, and it's okay that you get stuck in the mud sometimes and get lost and wander. But then it also showed me that I have these tools from my dad, his truck with the winch on the front. Like, I was now assuming a position where I would be able to help other people who were stuck. All I had to do was get myself unstuck. But that dream was the thing that helped me get unstuck. It's the thing that helped me suddenly shift forward and suddenly change all my focus and learn how to be compassionate with myself, to stop judging myself and feeling so much guilt, and how to focus on, what I'm really doing here. I've been learning all these skills and all these tools so that I can be there to help other people when they need it. And so that dream right there was what really helped me make a transformation at that point.
Thank you, Karen, for coming on the podcast and sharing that dream. So amazing. I always love hearing how these dreams can help people be more compassionate and feel more love in the process of grieving. Next, we have episode 207, Jen Lee. She's the author of Grieving and Dreams. Really love her book because it talks all about the dream she has after her sister died, and she had a ton of dreams. I was really impressed. I really loved the episode. So if you love grief dreams, really check out that episode and her book. And so in this clip, we asked her what dream she wanted to have if she could of her sister. And what was interesting about it is she brings in another dream that she had while writing her book. So check it out.
I actually would like to dream about her knowing about the book. I've had some where it seemed to be indirectly about the book. When I was first starting to write it and I was feeling very unsure about going forward with it, I had a dream about her where I was in like a glass house and I was feeling very vulnerable and scared, and just I think there were people trying to come into the house, and then all of a sudden she appeared and she just stepped into the house, and it felt like instantly comforting. Like I just felt safe. And then when I woke up, I thought, God, that's sort of like my fear about writing the book, like this glass house of letting just strangers into my life and telling everybody all kinds of things. And of course there's that vulnerability aspect of it, and just feeling nervous about how people are going to react as well. And then here she comes, sort of saying like, it's okay, like I'm right here, so you don't have to be scared of the strangers coming into the house. So then that sort of gave me some push to like be like, okay, like she's okay with me writing this about her. And then since then I've had various dreams about the book, and there have been some where I think she is aware of it. And I know there was one I had recently where in the dream I was thinking like, oh, I'm gonna give her a copy so she can finally read it. So throughout all the dreams I've had where it seems like she's aware of it, she's never really like I've never really talked to her about it or like showed it to her, or just to be like, look what I wrote about you, and have her read it and just see what, I guess, just to get her reaction. So I think that is a dream that I would like to have one day, tonight if possible.
Thank you. That's going to wrap up this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. And it's been really entertaining looking back at all the episodes we've done this year and all the brilliant, amazing, vibrant people we've had on to join us in conversation, in healing, and in just helping us navigate our grief journey, our collective grief journey, and our individual journeys. It's just been a really big year for transformation on a personal level and on a collective level. And I'm just so glad that you could tune in today and just kind of, walk down memory lane with us. So looking forward to 2022 and all the amazing guests we're going to have on this year, and look forward to connecting with you all and wishing you joy and good health, as we like to say, as we wrap up the podcast, with love and gratitude from us to you.
Thank you again for listening to the episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you want to learn more about the topic, please check out our platform at griefdreams.ca. On there you can find our 2 online courses. So the first one is a Grief Dreams workshop that I developed, which is designed to help you learn all about the topic. And the second one is Crazy in Love, using romantic relationships as a vehicle for growth. And this is designed to help you rethink modern intimate relationships, and that is by myself and Jade Carling Black. On the website, you can also book a one-on-one Grief Dreams consulting session with me to discuss your own dreams, or if you want to learn more about the topic. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Clubhouse, at Grief Dreams. We have 2 clubs on Clubhouse that you can follow, and those are Grief Dreams, and the other one is Grief Café. If you have Facebook, you can follow our Grief Dreams podcast page to be notified when we release new episodes. You can also join the Grief Dreams Facebook group, and on there you can share your dreams and hear more dreams of others. Once again, to help support the podcast, please subscribe and rate the podcast on your platform that you listen on. This helps our show come up when people search for grief podcasts to listen to. Also, you can become a member of the podcast through Patreon, and we have 3 membership levels, $1.50, $7, and $20 a month. So if you want to give, please go there to see what perks we have to offer. This money helps us run the podcast. You can find the Patreon link in the show notes below. We would like to thank all of those who continue to support us. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you can be comforted by your dreams tonight.